Hello and welcome to another episode of Weather or Not. I'm your host, Filippo Formica, joined alongside our forecaster, Jonathan Domow. And Jonathan, we saw a cold front move throughout the Commonwealth this past week, brought some rain, much needed. Is there any more beneficial rain on the way for this weekend?
That's a great question. We did see a cold front moving through, bringing rain earlier this week, and we're actually tracking the onset of another cold front that may or may not bring some rain.
All right, and we'll hear more from Jonathan in his short-range forecast. But first, here is Nature in the News. At least 3 people across the British Isles have passed away due to Storm Amy, formerly Hurricane Humberto. The storm brought wind gusts close to 100 miles per hour to Ireland and the United Kingdom earlier this month, causing almost 200,000 properties across the two countries to lose power. Travel was also impacted across the island countries, with over 100 flights canceled and almost 20 flights diverted from Dublin International Airport. The storm was the strongest October storm on record across Northern Europe, with a minimum pressure of 947.9 millibars. For reference, a low pressure with 980 millibars central pressure is considered a strong system. Local authorities of the two island countries are still recovering from the storm.
The world's driest non-polar desert saw an explosion of color this week after unusual downpours drenched Chile's Atacama Desert. This year has been one of the Atacama's wettest in recent years, according to experts, with rainfall amounts 30 times higher than average. Seeds of over 200 species of flowers lay dormant until the proper amount of moisture needed to grow is met. 15 millimeters, or about half an inch, is needed for the flowers to sprout. Some high elevation parts of the Atacama saw 60 millimeters, or around 2.5 inches. Most of the flowers will be gone by November of this year, with some of the most drought-resistant species lasting until January.
Although Hurricane Imelda didn't make landfall on the U.S. coast, the impacts of the storm were still felt. The storm brought Category 2 hurricane force winds to the island of Bermuda, with a 105-mile-per-hour wind gust recorded. 2 to 4 inches of rain also fell on the island as the storm moved through. Closer to home, high surf and coastal flooding hit the Outer Banks of North Carolina, causing a half-dozen houses along the oceanfront to collapse from their raised structures. Thankfully, no reports of injuries or deaths were reported from North Carolina or Bermuda as the storm moved through. Imelda became a post-tropical cyclone and dissipated last week.
This past week, the Northern Hemisphere was treated to a supermoon, which goes by 2 names this year. The harvest moon is the full moon closest to the autumnal equinox, and the hunter's moon is the full moon following the harvest moon. Normally, the harvest moon happens in September and the hunter's moon in October. But this year, the full moon closest to the autumnal equinox is in October rather than September, hence both names being applicable. But what's the reason for the supermoon's orange appearance? It's because the Earth's atmosphere scatters out blue light when the moon is at a low angle on the horizon, leaving brighter, warmer colors, such as orange, visible to us. If you missed this year's Harvest Hunter's Moon, keep an eye out for the Harvest Moon next year on September 26th and the Hunter's Moon on October 26th, 2026. This past week saw a mix of sun, clouds, and rain, but enough with the past. Let's take a look at the future. Here's the outlook for Friday, which is the date of the Penn State Homecoming Parade. And if you're out at the parade, you could expect nice and clear conditions, and that's all thanks to this high pressure that's sitting to our northeast over New England and New York State. That's going to keep away all the clouds and all the precipitation. In fact, the only precipitation on the map that we can even see is up in the northern part of the Midwest. That's not going to make any impact here in State College in time for the homecoming parade. Now, Saturday is a little bit of a different story. We can see that high pressure exiting out eastward over the Atlantic, and that's going to start to give way to some less than desirable conditions. In time for kickoff at the Penn State homecoming game versus Northwestern, you could expect a cloud or two in the sky. And that system that was over the Midwest here, that low pressure and cold front, will have pushed eastward. The rain will still be situated off to our northwest, not impacting State College. But I also want you to take close closer look rather to this rain to our south. That will transform into this large blanket of rain in time for Sunday, and that's all due to this low pressure system that's bringing rain up from the coast. It's bringing in warm, moist air from the Gulf and the Gulf region, and it's going to bring a lot of rain. It's going to be rain stretching up from north in Vermont and New Hampshire all the way down south to parts of Virginia. So if you're out and about on Sunday, you're going to want to keep in mind that you're going to want a rain jacket and an umbrella if you're going out, even maybe adjusting your travel plans if necessary. Now, if you're at the Penn State Homecoming Parade, keep an eye out for the College of Earth and Mineral Science. You might even see a few familiar faces marching in the parade. The full forecast for Friday, it's going to be nice and sunny. Temperatures will be closer to average 61 rather, not 81 degrees, 61 degrees on Friday. We're going to back off into the low 40s for Friday night, 42 degrees, not quite cold enough for frost. We're going to need temperatures that are below freezing for frost to form, but you're going to start to see some clouds mix into the sky, and by Saturday we'll have more clouds increasing, but the temperature will have jumped up to just above average, 64 degrees at kickoff for the Penn State homecoming game. Saturday night sees the possibility of a rain chance, but the rain might happen so late on Saturday that it's actually early morning on Sunday. So keep an eye out for that if you're out very late on Saturday rather, or early on Sunday. The temperature will be a little bit higher than the previous low temperature, 48 degrees. And by Sunday, that's when we can see the widespread rain chances. The temperature will have dipped below average, 61 degrees, and rainy for Sunday. Now we're going to throw it to Frank with the feature on a newly upgraded EF5 tornado.
You may or may not have heard, but the EF5 tornado drought worldwide has come to an end. Just this past Monday, the National Weather Service has upgraded the Enderlin EF4 tornado to an EF5. This marks the first time a tornado has gotten the EF5 classification since Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. Today, I'll be explaining what happened, why it happened, the damage and the effects, and why it got upgraded to an EF5 tornado. Earlier that afternoon, a potent upper-level trough lifted across the northern plains. Strong wind shear, nearly 60 knots between the surface and 500 millibars, combined with extreme instability approaching 3,000 joules per kilogram. A boundary draped across southeastern North Dakota became the perfect trigger. By about 9:30 p.m., two discrete supercells ignited along that boundary just southwest of Lisbon. Each storm developed a rotating mesocyclone, producing vivid cloud-to-ground lightning and rapidly organizing inflow. As they moved northeast, the two storms began to merge, a rare and dangerous interaction that amplified rotation in the lower atmosphere. Radar imagery showed the new combined supercell developing a classic hook echo, while a long line of storms trailed behind, racing east across North Dakota into Minnesota. This lone merged storm became the Enderlin supercell. Just before 10:55 p.m., rotation tightened dramatically southwest of Enderlin in Ransom County. Within minutes, a violent tornado touched down, immediately widening to several hundred yards, and intensified rapidly as it crossed rural farmland east of town. Camera footage shows just how large this tornado really was. The twister remained on the ground for roughly 12 miles, carving a path more than a mile wide at its peak. Radar showed debris lofted nearly 20,000 feet into the atmosphere, a signature of a high-end, long-track tornado. Homes were swept from foundations, steel grain bins were flattened, and trees were completely debarked. For about 20 minutes, the storm maintained EF4 to EF5 strength before weakening and merging with the larger squall line moving into Minnesota. When the sun rose the next morning, the scale of destruction was staggering. 3 people lost their lives, dozens were injured, and multiple families lost everything. Entire farmsteads were gone, reduced to bare slabs and scattered debris fields. Power lines lay twisted across gravel roads, and massive rail cars lay overturned beside the tracks. Enderlin's downtown was spared the direct hit, but the surrounding rural communities bore the brunt. Volunteers, first responders, and neighbors from miles away worked side by side clearing rubble and searching for survivors. In a town of just a few hundred, everyone knew someone affected. In the days after the storm, survey teams from the National Weather Service and engineering partners arrived to assess the damage. Tornadoes in the United States are rated using the enhanced Fujita scale, introduced in 2007. Instead of measuring wind directly, the EF scale uses damage indicators, from homes and schools to trees, poles, and industrial structures, each with a degree of damage that corresponds to wind estimated speeds. An EF5, the most extreme classification, signifies winds over 200 miles per hour, capable of obliterating everything above ground. Initial surveys rated the Enderlin tornado just shy of EF4 status, but later analysis told a different story. Engineers discovered multiple loaded grain hopper cars tipped and an empty tanker thrown nearly 500 feet, damage requiring winds over 210 miles per hour. With homes swept clean from foundations and trees scored bare, the National Weather Service upgraded it to an EF5, the first time in the United States since 2013 and North Dakota's first on record. For scientists, it ended a 12-year EF5 drought. For residents, it marked a night they'll never forget. EF5 tornadoes account for less than 0.1% of all U.S. tornadoes. The Enderlin tornado now joins a very short list to reach that threshold. And that is the story of the Enderlin EF5, a once-in-a-generation tornado that rewrote the history books.
Interesting to see the high temperature for this part of the year is only 63 degrees. And if we go back to just last Monday, we were sitting in the 80s. So it's quite interesting to see how high above average we can get here in State College. Now, your weekend recap. For Friday in the Penn State Homecoming Parade, we're looking at nice and sunny skies. The temperature will be a few degrees below average, 2 degrees below average to be exact. So you're not going to need the rain jacket, you're not going to need the umbrella, but you might want to break out some layers, maybe a nice cardigan or even a sweater. And I want to take close attention to the low temperature, 42 degrees. It's low enough to be pretty chilly in the morning, but it's not low enough to lead to any frost. For that, we need below 36 degrees, not 63 degrees. And for freezing, we need below 32 degrees. Now, for Saturday, it's going to be partly cloudy, still nice and dry. You can keep the rain jacket and the umbrella packed away for the Penn State football game. The temperature will be a degree above average, 64, so you might want to leave out the layers, but it's really up to you. But by Sunday is when we're going to see the widespread rain threat. That's where we're going to need the rain jackets and the umbrellas if you're going to be outside. So keep in mind, if you have any outdoor plans on Sunday, you might want to think again about doing them or even adjust your travel plans because it will be a wet one on Sunday. Now, here is your extended outlook. You can see below average temperatures is the theme of the week. We can see 63 degrees all across the board here on average. Now, Monday, we're going to be just below average, 62 degrees, partly cloudy skies, which is a trend you'll see continuing throughout most of the week. Tuesday will be a degree above average, 64 degrees, before we see the warm spot on the week, Wednesday, where we're going to be 66 degrees, 3 degrees above average before we return back down to below average on Thursday, about 60 degrees. And then in time for Friday, we'll be back up to 62 to even 63 degrees. But you'll notice that even though there's clouds every day of the week, there is no rain. So once you pack away the rain jacket after Sunday, you can leave it packed up until at least next week. So keep in mind that you're going to want to keep the layers out because it's going to get chillier and chillier as time goes on. But now it's time for the Weather Whiz Quiz answer. We'll see if you got the answer right.
So State College recorded a high temperature of 81 degrees this past Monday, and our Weather Whiz Quiz question for this week was, what was the highest ever recorded temperature in October in State College? And the answer was C, 90 degrees, and that occurred on October 7th of 1941. And Jonathan, I don't think we're going to be seeing 90 degrees here in State College anytime soon.
You would be correct. We had a cold front moving through earlier this week, which brought our temperatures down below average. And moving forward, we're looking at cooler nights, which in turn lead to cooler days. So we will not be approaching 90 anytime soon for the rest of October.
It seems like the start of sweater weather is here. Thank you for your forecast, Jonathan, and be sure to stay tuned next week for our next episode of Whether or Not.